maybe leaning a little bit into this last part of what you said, right? I think whenever organizations are trying to implement new technology, right, even if it was like the basic stuff, like when you were giving the shop floor examples of, say, just implementing SAP back in the day or basic digitization, and now you're talking about potentially redesigning the entire flow using new technology, right? Any advice, any thoughts for people on how to sort of think about this change management, right? Both in terms of how do you prioritize, how do you decide, what is the low hanging fruit, what do I go to next? And then also in terms of handling the organization change that has to happen, right? People have to adapt to new ways of working. Any thoughts and any lessons from your long career having seen a variety of change management having been implemented in various places?
Yeah. So there is, I think I would categorize it as when change happens, which is kind of linear, and change which is exponential, right? When it is a linear change, uh, it's easier because it is not non-disruptive. It is incremental across implementation. The thought is incremental, the implementation is incremental. Humans adapt really well with incrementality, right? So that is fine. But this falls under the bracket of exponential change, right? So there will be disruption. And whenever disruption happens, there are certain things which are essential, right? So one is uh, the top management or leadership or founder resolve that this is needed, right? And it will cause disruption. But if we don't do it, we'll become irrelevant. If not in the 6 months, 2, 3 years, we'll just lose our competitive edge, right? So change management in an exponential changing environment is uh, disruptive. And therefore, by design, it would require a lot of determination and focus, time involvement, top down, right? With no exception. So that is like element number one, right? So for example, okay, let's take the example which you would have seen in the Bay Area when Twitter let go so many people, and then Facebook let go so many people, then Microsoft started letting go so many people, and so on. And people were saying that you are raking billions in profit for, let's say, Meta or Microsoft, and you are the profit pool is increasing every year. So there is a growth rate in profit also. It's not stagnated or anything, right? So what is the need for letting go people, right? And you would understand from companies like these who have never done these kind of measures, right? Forget in bad times, in great times. These were great times for the company. They took this call that we need to rethink how we do this organization, because if we don't do it, we'll lose our competitive edge. We need to locate resources somewhere else for the future, etc. And some roles are truly becoming redundant, right? Now, that's a tough call given the context of the company, which is doing well, etc. But it had to be done, because if you don't do it, you'll be falling behind. And this is the nature of the game, right? Stakes are high. So that is, I think, one. The second is, when implementing such things, it is always good to have a special team created with with a lot of empowerment by virtue of tag teaming with the top leadership, um, not relegated to a team which tries some pilots here and there, right? You cannot do that. So a crack team working with the founders or CEOs, CXOs, whoever the leadership is, program managing the entire implementation, minute monitoring whether everybody's following these kind of things, and a regular cadence with the leadership on what are we achieving with it. So as an example, if it is about an HR org redesign, right? You will want a metric on it. If you are wanting to do engineering productivity increase, there should be daily metrics on how many check-ins happened. Are there qualitative metrics that we are collecting, etc. Right? So this mega dashboard for a large operation, especially program managed centrally, is very important. Now, then, of course, there is the incentive disincentive, right? So you need to put the incentive disincentive at the get-go, think very deeply about it, so that everybody's incentivized to do it, and it's not left to a matter of huge debate, discussion, etc., etc. All of the points that I'm mentioning is in view of the exponential change that is happening. If it was incremental, we would have done it in a very non-disruptive, smooth manner, right? But such changes are required. Sometimes you may have to redo your business itself, right? Maybe change the business model completely, right? Those are tough decisions. So you need this first motivation, incentives, a crack team, right cadence, right? It's almost like starting a new business from scratch, and whatever you needed then is needed now, right? So that's how I would deal with change management in the times of an exponential change.
Awesome. I think that's a really good way to put it. So first of all, you need the support from your founders or whoever is leading those functions, and they really need to be on board that this is something we want to do. After that, you really need to be able to solve all of those bits and pieces, put it all together, and figure out what really works for you. And doing it, the sooner that we do it, the better the results will be. So that's a very that's something I think is a really good way to look at it. Here, I would say from my personal experience as well as some other people who might be on this call might relate to this, that when you are not in that leadership position, like when you are, say, middle management, you have identified a particular process that could very easily be automated. AI could be brought in, it would make the entire function 100x simpler, more efficient, etc. But since AI and its demonstrated capabilities in the particular function that you might be talking about might be very limited, leadership might be hesitant to bring it that disruptive change to the organization, which might currently be running very smooth. So, in these kind of scenarios, how do you pitch to the leadership that this is something we should definitely be doing? How do you get their buy-in, and how do you kind of get it done? Like, this is something that's a challenge that I personally have been facing in my organization as well. So would like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think it flips the question a little bit from the top down to, if you have individual contributions who see the value of disruptive technology and they want to evangelize it within the organization, get leadership buy-in. How do you do it? I mean, I resonate with Shogoto. I tried to implement an AI vision system in the factory when I was at P&G. It took a lot of effort. Finally, we were able to get in some buy-in, but then it took a lot of time to be able to implement things. The results were delayed, and then it didn't really go anywhere, right? In hindsight, I would probably do it in a very different way. So I'm curious to know how you think people should consider approaching this from an individual contributor, from a junior middle management perspective.
So there are various ways to look at it. If I were to broadly bucket, right? So one is middle management should always look upon themselves as leaders of the company of the future, right? And one of the key skills of a potential leader is influencing skills. Can you influence, socialize the idea in some ways, find the right mechanisms to make compelling cases, right? So this is what an aspirational middle management needs to do, right? Now, let's say you are in a peculiar organization which is completely impervious. You can't do anything, right? Or it is just too difficult, right? My personal opinion is, if you really believe that this is a great idea, can make a big impact in companies like the ones where you are or outside, just jump out and create it, right? Move out of that organization, because you might be wasting your time, right? And the one lesson that I didn't tell before, right, is that in any role, any company, whether big or small, you will be spending a huge number of hours, especially as you progress in your career, right? The higher up you go, the more stress you will have, the more hours you will put in, etc. So, and this is regardless of whether you are an entrepreneur or you are an operator, whatever it is, right? So it's the incentive is just do your own thing, right? Because that is the best expression of creativity that God gave you, right? Or the talent that God gave you is to create something new from scratch, enable other people, provide employment and all the good stuff, right? So my answer will be purely more extreme in that sense that if it is impervious, you are good at influencing, but still it is impervious, just move out, don't waste time. Because this time of exponential changes, right, offers huge openings and moments of innovation to entrepreneurs, right? So if you are stuck in that kind of sense, just move out, man.
That's actually quite a good take at it. If the leadership themselves are not ready to take the risks to disrupt their own internal processes, they probably are not ready to take the risk to grow their business to the scale that it needs to. Right? So I
Yeah,
think that's something that makes a lot
yeah,
of sense. That's a good way to
yeah,
look at it.
yeah. And I would not say this with that much conviction, maybe 10 years back, 7 years back, right? Because it was not a time for exponential change. There was incrementality in changes. You were making process 20% more efficient. You were not rethinking the process itself. Today, you are doing it. So if your management is not doing it, even while they are hearing all the signals and so on, then there is and if this part is core to the business, then it is anyways right for disruption, right? It is going to be disrupted one way or the other, right? So it's a better thing in such times to venture out and experiment a little bit with life than we keep trying hard.
Got it. Got it. I think another particular example that I can think of while we are trying to implement AI into our day-to-day business processes is that while AI is able to do generic tasks with a very very good accuracy, there are some issues that AI also faces. So, for example, if there are tasks which require a lot of niche capabilities or a lot of
Yeah.
niche knowledge requirements, those become some things where AI is not able to do it well. Or maybe let's say even if the task is something that the AI model can be trained for, the task might be so niche, so small that the ROI is not enough worth it. Right? You can't train a new model for that just because you want to replace, let's say, 10 employees doing that job. So that's one aspect that we typically face a lot of issues in. At the same time, another issue that comes up in some of these cases is the data security. Since the firm that I currently work with deals with US healthcare and the revenue cycle management of that, something that we face on a day-to-day basis is access to the data to be able to do the job that we need to do, right? So let's say we have to integrate our systems with Epic, with NextGen, or all the other, software providers that are there in the US healthcare system. But that access is limited by these mammoth organizations. So it really limits the capabilities for us to be able to perform well. So given these kind of scenarios where data security is an issue, etc., how is it that you feel that AI is going to go forward and make an impact in these specific fields? Or, something relevant might be done in these specific fields, if at all. What is your take on?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question, and many organizations, are very cautious in using AI and implementing these changes because of this fear of the data residency, whether it goes outside for training the baseline model itself, in what way, form is unclear, and then the other is the ROI point you mentioned, that Is it worth doing your own model if you want to trade off in favor of privacy and data residency in-house and so on, right? So let's tackle the second part first, right? So which is ROI. Now, the great thing about the changes in AI is, and it will continue, is a great open source, movement driven primarily started by Llama, but Meta probably, but multiple efforts that are going in a very thriving open source community that is building this, and that gives you an opportunity to leverage all of that. And the benefit of that is you own the model, right? You take a baseline model, fine tune it, use the weights as a starting point, implement it on-prem or on your cloud in the in AWS or Azure, in your private containers and so on. So you're not using any out-of-the-shelf model per se, right? And that gives you a big advantage. And most cases in enterprise will fall under this, where you have some contextual knowledge repository and you have a generative capability of a baseline model. And because you have narrowed down the problem to your domain, your company, your ecosystem, it can do with a small model a lot of the functionality which you would expect from a large model without the issues or hallucinations that are associated with large models. The issue is that hallucinations are like a feature, right? It is creativity. It is in reality creativity. And the more the model knows, the more creative it gets, right? So you need to, the moment you narrow it down, a smaller model is capable enough. You are fully in control of the development, the repositories that are being used for both fine tuning as well as things like RAG, etc., where you are basing it on a knowledge repository, right? So that's the way to deal with it. Leverage open source, right? If you're very small, you're doing a lower stakes experiment, start with OpenAI APIs, and they also give you containerized solutions, right? Where you don't have to worry about whether the data is going anywhere, or of course, this was the biggest objection that all enterprise customers had, and this was the first solution that they created to protect against this, right? So that has given a lot of comfort to people, and so that is there also, right? Then let's say you are on public cloud, you don't want to do in-house on-prem mini data center type of your own. Even all the AWS or Google, etc., have their Vertex, their AI playground, and so on, right? Where they provide these containerized solutions for you, right? Where you don't have to, you can make a copy of a public model, run the fine tuning in your space with no data issue, security issue whatsoever. And almost all of these companies or public cloud providers provide for the most popular open source model. So if you want to just get started and let's say low stakes to higher risk and higher stakes, I would start with OpenAI APIs, right? Move to an equivalent smaller open source model on public cloud, right? But in your own environment, of course, right? And then when you see the outcomes coming, you just switch to a completely in-house open source based model, but on-prem, etc., for additional comfort and security and maybe latency considerations, right? So I think that is how you may be able to think through this versus going one way or the other, right? So that resolves both your ROI problem. The smaller the model, the more on-prem you have, or the more on public cloud in a pay-as-you-go setup you have, you solve the ROI issue. Smaller model, pay as you go, right? And the data privacy issue is again solved by these open source models, which you have fully containerized in your public or on-prem kind of setup.
I think that's really helpful. This really solves a lot of issues that might be there for smaller companies when they want to do some of these functions. So thanks a lot for that.